All right, welcome to Get Good tonight. Tonight we will be discussing PvP and a whole bunch of other random things. Sorry about missing the show last week. We had a few guests that couldn't end up making the show last night, so we decided to reschedule for this evening. And community event happened that was planned, so here we are without them again. But that's all right. We'll make up for it again next week. I am your host, Commander Kane.
And I am Bellator Lucis. I almost stopped the stream.
GG. All right, so let's dive into this. Oh, also, at the end of the show, we will be giving away a choice of one of two minions between Gestahl and or Bluebird minion. So if you are here in the studio with us, you will have the opportunity to win either one of those. So without further ado, I will pass the mic off to Bellator, and we will dive into our topics for the evening.
Alright, so like Kane said, today we'll be talking primarily about PvP, or player versus player. Um, as you may already know, Final Fantasy XIV has been kind of wonky in terms of whether people enjoy PvP or not. You're going to just a brief history on it. It doesn't look like it was ever intended to have PvP in the first place, or at the very least very few, if any, of the skills, or rather the PvE skills, were oriented for the PvP playstyle. There's been a lot of balance changes with modifications to skills, patch to patch tweaks in potency and added effects to skills, as well as individual PvP skills that have been added to the game and reworked over time. But we're still kind of in a phase where you can enjoy PvP, but you definitely need to go out of your way to really get into it. So if that's said, PvP itself isn't quite, it's not like you shouldn't PvP, because clearly a lot of people enjoy doing it. And in fact, just last night, we hosted a tournament. It was a single elimination tournament with 23 participants that signed up, and over 2 hours, we fought each other, trolled each other, had some really good fights, had some crushing defeats, had some really close ones. We're hanging on to our HP to the last 1%, and experience was all over the place. We've got one of our own friends, Amy, who had zero PvP experience. In fact, her first PvP experience was 2 hours before the event, where she asked me if she could spar against me. And and then we've got people who have, like myself, I've PvP'd in other games. I did it in WoW. I did it in SWTOR, Star Wars: The Old Republic. And since that was the first game, or since that was the last game I played before I came to Final Fantasy XIV, I took a lot of my experience from that and tried to apply it into PvP here in the Final Fantasy world. What about you, Kane? What's your PvP background?
In all honesty, I mean, besides first person shooters, I haven't done very much, if at all, any PvP in this game. I mean, when the Feast first came out, I remember doing that with you for a while, and I was just getting so frustrated because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I just stopped trying. I didn't really care to learn or try to dive too much into it, to be perfectly honest. I just wasn't for me.
That's understandable. It definitely, like I said earlier, definitely PvP isn't something that just you could easily dive into this game and start enjoying immediately. For a couple of different things, and they're actually things that we'll be discussing tonight. So, with our background out of the way and information about the results for the PvP tournament will be linked in the description of the show and shared on Facebook as well for those of you that are commenting on the Famfrit community post, um, or elsewhere wherever we share it. We'll be sharing that as well. So there's a video, and then there's the tournament ranking results, so you can see what went on. The very first topic, then, I guess, would be PvP skills, and I kind of talked about it a little bit already, where There's we actually have anywhere between what, like 6 and 8 extra skills that are only PvP oriented. Like you can't use them in PvE. You can't use them in raiding. You can only use them when either in a duel or in front lines or in Wolves Den, right?
Correct. I mean, that was one of the things. That's my crash course. I was using Ninja in the PvP area, and there was a bunch of skills I had never seen before. I didn't even know that there was a separate set of PvP skills until you had told me so. I was really like flustered and confused as to how I was getting like stunned out of nowhere by this shoulder charge or whatever the hell it was by another ninja, which turns out to be it was overwhelmed. So I mean that stun really like it. I guess you could say it shocked me more than anything because I didn't know what the hell was going on. All of a sudden I was running and then I just stopped and there's someone right in front of me beating the tar out of me. So I mean, there's definitely a sharp learning curve using the new or the PvP skill versus your standard PvE skills.
Yeah, that's definitely understandable, especially considering that um, the game developers have kind of tried to hold our hands, and for the most part, for instance, for PvP at least, or for PvE at least, we kind of learn the ropes as we level up, right? So we do slightly harder dungeons, we get introduced to new skills through our job or class quests, we we essentially slowly learn over time on our way to 50, and then again from 51 to 60 what we have available to us, what our tools are, and then the game almost essentially forces us to use it because in solo play, if you don't know your rotation, I mean, there's a decent chance you'll still kill it because the bar is set very low in terms of just making sure the game's enjoyable and you don't have to have a perfect rotation to kill your target in a class quest. But on occasion, I think I can't remember. Like for instance, uh, there was a white mage quest, or there were several quests that you literally had to know what what your priority was, like whether you were healing or whether you were tanking, like which skill that you just learned will give you the ability to pass that class quest. They at least tried to do that, and then in dungeons they ramp it up. They ramp up how much DPS you need to do, whether you need to AOE groups down, or if you have defensive cooldowns or offensive cooldowns that you need to beat a DPS check. That doesn't really happen with PvP. It's like we're kind of thrown into the fire, right? So when Wolves Den actually first came out, and then Frontline came out, there's no build up. There's no PvP dummy that you can really hit and get decent feedback on what you're doing, whether you're popping things at the right time or using the right situational skills. You just kind of get thrown into the fray, and you learn over time. You learn by getting your head bashed in by more experienced players. That's really it. Does that sound like what you would have to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is. It's essentially a trial by fire because you're going in there with obviously people who have PvP'd before versus someone who
absolutely.
hasn't. There is. It's essentially, like I said, there is a very sharp learning curve for this stuff. Although it is enjoyable at times, it is very frustrating too, especially for new players going against obviously the more experienced players. You're gonna get your face bashed. I mean, that's that simple. There's no way around it, unfortunately.
Yeah. And while that's not a horrible learning experience for some, I mean that's really very few games teach PvP properly. Like with both Final Fantasy and SWTOR and WoW, I learned by getting my face bashed in. I learned by going in and getting crushed and watching other healers who were doing things properly. Uh, and even then, our PvP skills are all over the place. Like we've had tweaks to it, obviously, but I was talking to Amy and I was telling her that she had PvP skills, and unfortunately, not only are our skills primarily very situational, but some classes like Bard and even Machinist, um, they got skills that were too situational. Like for instance, in the 1v1 tournament, a good half of her skills were useless to her. 2 of them restored MP. 1 of them did a scan and it uncloaked hidden players like ninjas, essentially uncloaked ninjas because no one else can hide. And while those skills are great in Frontline or Wolves Den, it's essentially useless in the 1v1 situation that she found herself in. Whereas other classes get wonderful utility skills. Like for instance, my experience as a healer, the only skill that was useless to us was the resurrection skill. That's it. And it was literally just a free res that we could do every couple minutes. And everything else benefited us in some way, whether it was debuffing someone or buffing ourselves, our magic resistance, or completely buffing damage, or completely preventing well, a 90% chance, which is practically completely preventing damage, attunement, as well as a bunch of other MP restore skills. So the balance of PvP is it's not there yet. At least it's not there for the duels. Like duels, for those of you that either are unsubbed and haven't played yet or haven't been keeping up the news, dueling was added with the latest patch, right? That was 3.4, and it's pretty awesome. I mean, we enjoy it specifically because now we can put our money where our mouth is, right? When we talk about screw you, scrub, 1v1 me.
Absolutely. And there's been so many times where I wish that I could have just. This was pre 3.4 when I wish we could have just had that Wolves Den area open for us and I could have just, essentially knocked someone's teeth out and then laugh at them and then tell them they're a scrub and that I am ultimately better than them.
Well, now with dueling in place, you can do that. And it's not perfect. It's nice. It's obviously got a lot of people. It's obviously got us interested in it. We ran a whole tournament about it. There's a bunch of people on right now. While I was raiding earlier tonight, one of my static members said that actually most of the people at Wolves Den Pier right now was from their FC, and they were just kind of dicking around. They were having fun. They were doing it on their own. But it's still not balanced. PvP skills need another run through. We probably won't see it for a long time, especially since if you've been paying attention to the FanFest news, they just announced, or yesterday they announced, tweaks to the cross-class skills. So if it's going to take until 4.0 for tweaks to cross-class skills to take effect, we're probably going to have to wait quite a bit longer for PvP skills to be tweaked. And they really
absolutely. I mean, like you said, the PvP skills are really unbalanced, and I mean, it's how do I explain this? They are unbalanced in a sense. If you have this class versus this class, obviously the class that has or you said it was white mage that it could essentially see the ninja, so it couldn't hide anymore. Correct?
No, not white mage. Machinist or bard.
Okay, so I mean, if you've got a bard versus a ninja, the bard's obviously going to win. One, because they can kite, essentially. I ran into this before. I fought Shanty, and the little shithead was machinist. All he did was run in a circle. So, I mean, I lost that one only because I couldn't stop him. I couldn't stop him long enough to actually get my full rotations in while he was kiting around the arena. So, I mean, it was one of those things where, if you've got, say, 2 ninjas going against each other, who knows the class better? But if you've got a machinist versus a melee DPS, I mean, the ranged DPS is obviously going to win. One, because they can kite and still move and avoid taking damage. And they're not going to have to do any type of range closing moves because all they've got to do is just keep moving and running.
Yes. So most people, I think, can agree that PvP, a proper PvP experience that everyone enjoys is one where, yes, your gear somewhat matters. Like if you show up with no gear, you should get you should get stomped, right? If you show up with, for some reason, half your equipment missing, all your accessories gone, you should have a harder time beating someone who came prepared. However, most of the the biggest factor in deciding who wins and loses should be skill when it comes to PvP. It should be how well you know your own skills, how well you know your opponent's skills, and then how well you execute it. And that's not all inclusive. There's a couple other things like how you deal with RNG, how you prep beforehand, how you play the mind game. There's a whole slew of things, but for the most part, we really want it to be skill based. And if there's a huge imbalance because of the actual skills in game and not your personal skills, if there's a huge imbalance because of that, that takes away a lot of the fun in it.
Absolutely. I mean, it takes it takes the enjoyment away from. I mean, so you got. I'm going to keep going back to this reference. An experienced machinist versus a brand new ninja to PvP. I mean, obviously, your experienced machinist is going to win because, like I said, they're able to do a lot more things and kite the melee DPS versus the melee DPS having to move and try to catch up and hoping that the combo connects when they're in range.
Yeah. And in terms of Final Fantasy XIV, like so there is somewhat of a balance. So we've been bashing on Square Enix for a long time, and the developers, but we do need to give them props on how they've actually tried to do the balance. It's very hard. So like we've been bashing them, and I haven't given them any slack because we for the most part I think the community really likes the devs and what they've been doing. Sure, there's been bumps and parts where we're like, oh, this really sucks. Like, why'd you do this? But that comes with trying new things in the game, trying to please everyone. We're not going to be able to please everyone. But at the very least, I can commend them on realizing that the skills aren't quite there, and they're trying to tweak it in such a way that, for instance, if you're going back to your example where you had an issue as a ninja locking down Shanti as a machinist, like you have, and I don't know if you were using your PvP skills or if you were comfortable with them yet, but you have the capability to stun lock, to enfeeble, and to also do pretty good burst. And given those tools, the stars still have to align properly. Like, you have to execute it properly. You have to capitalize on the appropriate time to do it. You need to play mind games with him, like almost essentially feint and say and make it look like you're about to do your burst, so he pops his cooldowns, and then like waiting for that. Like that, we saw that in the tournament. We saw I pointed out a couple situations where either defensive buffs were not up in time, and there was like massive summoner burst, like I explicitly pointed that out, or on the flip side, still with the summoner class, where a Tri-Disaster went out and it was immediately cleansed, all the stuff. So the summoner burst was completely locked down. So those types of like rock paper scissors-esque kind of thing is crucial in the PvP fight, in the experience, in figuring out who wins and who loses.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, it all determines, or it's all based off of experience. I mean, I didn't use any of my PvP skills when I was going to get Shanty, and he didn't use any of his. One, because I had completely forgotten I'd set up a hotbar for my ninja PvP specifically, and I didn't realize it until after we were done, and then I just said, ah, crap, there it is. I had forgotten all about it. So I didn't remember I had those tools still available to me. But it's all, how do I phrase this? It's all, God dang it, I can't even think of the word right now. Damn it, I just had it. But it's all based on how you play. It's all based off tactics, essentially. Like, all right, so you're going to essentially try to figure out what they're going to use, how you're going to counter it. You're trying to stay 2 steps ahead of them when they're thinking 1 step ahead of you. So you're going to be on the exact same page as each other, trying to figure out who's going to use what skill, who's going to use it when. Are you going to burst damage, or are you going to sit there and, essentially lay down and try to take it, and then just lure them into a false sense of security and crush them at that point.
Right. Yes, and that was shameless self-plug to our video of what happened last night. There were a couple of points where we saw, like, we asked, oh, who is on the offensive right now? Who's playing defensively? Like, what mind games are they playing? And at the very least, that's one of the best parts of PvP. Like, no two fights are going to be the same. You'll see similar tactics,
absolutely.
but it's not going to play out the same.
Yeah, because one player may be more experienced in PvP than the other one, because you just don't know who you're going against at that point. And we keep bringing up the event last night, which was freaking awesome, by the way. There was a lot of God dang it, I keep drawing blanks for these words. There was just a lot of like screwing around to see who was testing each other's limits beforehand, and then once the fight actually kind of started, that's when all hell would break loose. Like between the two warriors, that was a good fight. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
The double stun at the beginning that we all just kind of like, oh hey,
God.
Look, they're doing the exact same thing.
I'm gonna low blow you, and I don't even know what the stun is for warrior, but that was the Dark Knight and the warrior that stunned each other at the beginning, which was freaking hilarious.
Yeah, there are quite a few good matchups, and you know what? That's a pretty decent segue into what's probably going to be the most controversial part of our discussion related to the tournament and how we had to deal with healers specifically and time limits. Now, here's one part that Square kind of screwed up with dueling, in the sense that they added it because we really, it would seem like they added it because we really wanted it, but it wasn't completely thought through all the way, because healers not having access to cleric stance has been there forever. Well, not forever. For a while, healers had access to cleric stance, and it was super OP. Like, a group of 8 white mages just crushed any other team setup in front lines, and that's one of the reasons they removed it. Like, they had all the regens, like for instance, a team of 8 white mages had all the healing, raw healing available, and they had, essentially, each of them had a 400 potency holy spam bomb that was an AoE. Like, just fighting that it was funny. It was kind of interesting to have it happen to you, but it was clearly imbalanced. So they took the banhammer and not the banhammer, the hammer, whatever, the tweak hammer.
The nerf hammer.
The nerf hammer, that's the word. And they slammed it real hard, and they did an extreme nerf, which was just get rid of cleric stance altogether. Which was fine, which was great, because in front lines, healers occasionally contributed to DPS. However, they had a pretty rough time in just keeping everyone alive with all the burst damage going on, and all the burst damage and the situational damage. So that was good for a long while. But then dueling came out, and it became 1v1, and healer DPS is, how do I say this? If you pitted an experienced healer, an experienced DPSing healer against a mildly experienced PvP or DPS war tank, the healer will probably win, but it will take a long time to kill them. If you placed equally skilled people together, as we saw last night, they're probably not going to kill each other.
Absolutely. I mean, those healer matches, I mean, sure, you could whittle away slowly at their health, putting dots up, doing your insta cast and stuff like that. But I mean, 90% of those fights, it was them running around. And the Astra that we had was just running around, expected benefit. Regen was up or shield was up, and they just tossed dots up on their target. And I mean, eventually the target just said, to hell with this, I'm just going to sit down. I don't want to keep chasing this person anymore. I'm not going to win. And that's essentially what happened. It was very demoralizing, I'm sure, for that person who got beat by an Astro, just simply because there was no way to absolutely catch them and destroy them.
Yeah, that really. Yeah, so if you guys, if you're watching now, or if you're one of those opponents, or if you were watching and you're like, oh, this is really boring.
And then wasn't it you against?
Oh, let me talk about that in a second. But I do want to talk about that. But I want to point out that, like, did I just mute myself? Hey, can you say something? Uh, oh, the call dropped. That's why. Hold on one moment while we deal with technical difficulties. Hey, Kane, you back?
I don't know where I dropped off at.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I
You
thought
need to
I
unmute
muted myself.
yourself, PJ.
Damn it. Okay, there we go.
I
Good
don't know what
call.
happened there. I was mid sentence and then it just kind of went quiet, so I was like, ah. And then I looked down at my phone and it said the call had failed or call had dropped. So I don't know what happened on whose end it was. Probably mine.
All right. Well, that's fine. Where what I was saying was you were starting to bring up my matches, and I definitely want to get to that, but I do want to linger on the Astro match and just healers in general because one, I want to apologize for people who felt like they got really bored during that because it was unfortunately one of those things that we had to kind of test out and see how it would work, and hopefully the rules that would be in place would be kind of geared towards dealing with it. And it turns out it was and it wasn't at the same time. Like, we had the time limit, which is what should have happened. But even at 10 minutes, it felt like it was a little bit long. However, it still wasn't enough. Like, for instance, that specific fight, there was a lot of kiting and there was a lot of healing themselves, and eventually, I think Yui Rem from RFC gave up because that sucks. It sucks to time out, and it sucks to not be able to kill your opponent just because either I didn't know if it was because she was or wasn't using her PvP skills. I think she was, but it was like a stalemate. Like, if both PvPers were fighting to kill each other, I think there would have been a chance um, for one of them to knock the other out. But if one of them was primarily self-preservation, so for the Astro, like it would make sense to try to keep yourself alive, keep your shields up whenever you can, and throw your dots on while kiting the player. That's a valid tactic. Like, I don't see why you shouldn't do that. That's one of the things you're good at. You throw up a dot, you keep yourself alive, you run away, because that's the frontline experience. But it's just another example of how one versus one is there but not quite yet for Final Fantasy 14 where we are. And for instance, um, so now if we're going to my battles as a scholar versus a dragoon, um, a warrior, and a dark knight, I believe. Um, I still kited on occasion. Um, but that was after I put my dots up and I was trying to position myself in a place where I had the advantage. And I was actually, I'm going to share my secret, for the event, for the tournament, I had a very specific PvP build. So my skills, I used my points and my skills, and I didn't put like for instance, I didn't put any points into the skill that allowed me to revive someone because that's absolutely useless to me. It was on my hotbar because I had the space because I use 5 hotbars, but I put all my points into skills that either gave me an advantage in self-preservation, like attunement, or gave me lower cooldowns on other skills. One of them reduced skill speed, one of them was a knockback, one of them was magic resistance up, very situational things. But I put points into those versus putting points into things that were useful in front lines, like the free res, super useful in front lines, but completely useless in 1v1. So not only did I already have what I felt was an appropriate PvP skill build, I also wore very specific gear. Um, I Before a couple tweaks to frontline, it wasn't uncommon for healers and even on occasion casters to wear Vit gear, to wear Vit accessories on the right side. It's because it was very definitely a slight nerf to the damage going out or healing going out, but it gave them the survivability to survive LBs, melee LBs with a sliver of health, just enough to live, versus getting completely one shot. Like, do you remember that, Kane? Like, do you remember that was your thing as a ninja? You could easily one shot people with melee LB.
Oh yeah, I would run up. I would stun the healer first, and then run behind them and whack them with my LB, and that was the end of them. Like,
Yes.
there was no coming back from that point.
Yes. The only defense a good healer had against that was wearing Vit gear. Literally wearing enough gear so that your HP was enough to survive that LB. And it was a difference between a healer having 9,000 health, and I think it was like either 10,005 or 11,000 health. It was like literally just enough to lustrate or benediction yourself or essential dignity. That was it. I bring this up because I did wear one piece of Vit gear, but the rest of my accessories were actually int gear. And then on the int gear, I threw more Vit on it. So I melded Vit 5s into it. But it was like, this is my PvP gear. This is my gear as a scholar that wants to do damage in PvP, but can't because we don't have access to something like Cleric Stance. So even with me pushing it as far as I could and doing as little kiting as I did, I think my very last match, I think it was against Ricard. My very last match was pretty much all the proof that I needed that there's more balance tweaks that need to happen with healers and others in at least in dueling, because that match ended in a ring out, which was, I tried to ring out. If you watched the video, I screwed up my first ring out. I baited him to the edge, and then I screwed up the positioning. I knocked him to the side instead, and then while I tried to bait him another time, he knocked me out instead. So it was a GG, well played. But we had to resort to that because I remember I was pushing my limits to DPSing him. I was keeping myself alive and burning my MP to the point where I was actually kind of worried about my MP usage, but I'm an idiot because I totally forgot to use my MP recover skill, my PvP skill. But even with pushing myself to the limit, I think I brought him down to like 30% once, and I was down to like 30%, and we both essentially self-healed ourselves. I healed myself through my normal heals, he popped the potion and his self-restore, and then I think he also had not blood for blood, the other one,
Bloodbath.
Bloodbath, yeah. And we essentially healed ourselves up and added another 2 minutes to the fight. Now I think if we ran the full 10-minute fight and we didn't rely on knockouts, one of us would have died. Either I would have, because I started using Shadow Flare and forcing him to fight in my Shadow Flare, and he would come in, hit, and leave. But one of us would force each other to die either through unhealable damage or him unable to keep up with my DPS, or me running out of MP and dying to him. But let's be honest, that's not a very fun fight.
No, absolutely not. Now, one thing I would like to touch on is essentially setting rules for PvP. How you do that with Triple Triad, how you can select certain rules and stuff like that. I think that's something that should be implemented in PvP personally, especially for the dueling. Like, If it's a healer versus healer match, all right, so we're going to set the rule to you can't use healing spells, so those will be disabled. You can use some self-preservation skills. I'm not too sure if healers have that stuff, but I mean, you can use your self-preservation skill to essentially regen your health or give yourself that little bit of extra health that you're going to need to survive the fight, as well as using pots and stuff like that to give you that edge versus your opponent at the same time. Because, I mean, watching a healer versus a healer fight is very boring. I watched one, and we were there for about 20 minutes, and they just ran around the arena, essentially throwing their dots on each other and then healing themselves as they're running around trying to chase each other until one of them finally gave up and said, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore.
I almost feel like either... At first, I was about to say we should unnerf Cleric Stance and allow it in duels. However, that doesn't negate the fact that healers have a lot of self-heal, obviously. It's on-demand heals unless you run out of NP. And minus me forgetting that I had a PvP MP restore skill, there's a very small chance of a healer running out of MP to heal themselves. So just unnerfing Cleric Stance and giving it to healers isn't enough, because that'll make healers be able to do damage and self-preserve. That's not fair. I think you're closer with your solution, and where it almost seems like we should have an untoggable Cleric Stance up, and the Cleric Stance should affect our pets. For instance, for scholars, for instance, we should be able to do damage. We should be able to hurt you just as hard as you hurt us, right? But we shouldn't be able to heal ourselves as well. Maybe we can spam heals, but like a 500 heal, like a heal that does 500 to 1000 HP because we're stuck in Cleric Stance. I would rather take a quicker death versus prolonging a fight for 10 to 20 minutes.
Oh, absolutely. That is something I can agree with you entirely on. I mean, there's just, like you said, healers and PvP are OP as hell. They can heal themselves as well as do damage. So, I mean, unless there's going to be some type of drastic change, which I'm hoping there is when the next major update comes out, it's going to have a lot to do with the dueling system and PvP tier, because it's kind of a neglected field at this point in time. I mean, there's things you can do, there's things you can't do, and it's kind of like the redheaded stepchild in Final Fantasy. We know it's there, no one really cares about it until you're...
Sorry, it looks like the call dropped again. Let me get it back online.
I'm sorry, I don't know what's happening. I just keep dropping my Skype call. Where did I stop at?
You were talking about PvP being like the redheaded stepchild.
Okay.
So we don't really...
We acknowledge that it's there, but no one really cares for it until they start getting to know it better. And then once they get to know it better, it's like this omnipotent thing that you just want to keep doing whenever you're not doing your progression rating, or if you want to do, or if you're bored with just rating in general, or you have nothing else to do. I guess it's just one of those back burner things that's just kind of there.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where you have to go out of your way to enjoy it, versus something that you can just queue for and enjoy immediately. And even before dueling, the problem with Frontlines, which is still there, and we've been complaining about it for a long time, was that you were restricted via your grand company. Like, we potentially have the number of people that want to PvP, but because of their choice of brand company, the queue times for certain people are through the roof.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that Shanty always complained about. He would say, he would spend 45 minutes to an hour in a queue for a PvP match that's only like 5 minutes long. The times don't add up. Like, it's not worth my time to spend 45 minutes in a queue waiting for a 5-minute match when I could be doing something else instead of PvPing.
Yes. So it feels like dueling is great when you're dealing with just DPS. That may be a restriction on future tournaments. I know we're going to do tournaments where we do stuff like weapons only, everyone's naked, no gear, or all one class, or only DPS, whatever. There's a ton of different stipulations we can throw in, but I think we're going to have to restrict healers from now on, unfortunately. Because even a healer versus healer fight sucks, just because of healers not having the DPS output. Like, we can do damage, but I've demonstrated that you have to really whittle them away. And I was prepared for it. I had potions. I even had max potions. Like, I was healing myself not just through my skills, but through HP restores. And I had the proper PvP skills, and I had the what I felt like was the proper PvP gear as well. And I just barely beat out the Dragoon. I think it was like a 5% versus 1% difference. Like, it was very close. It was a good match. My hands were trembling afterward, like, just because of how we pulled it off. But like, it wasn't the same as a, like, for instance, monk versus monk fight. Like, sometimes the fights end really quickly and you feel like it's a little lackluster. So in a way, that's still kind of a little bit unbalanced. Like, if a fight's over in 10 seconds, that's kind of cool. That's it must be great for whoever wins. It kind of sucks for whoever lost. But if you're watching it, you're like, oh, it's over. Okay, that person was clearly either was much better or had the upper hand and just crushed the other one. A fight that lasts like, I think tank versus tank fights that last like a minute long are um, most entertaining, because like, when you saw a home game, you're like, oh, is he gonna do it now? Or you saw you know, you saw one of the tanks lose half their health and then they work their way back up. You thought that the fight was over, but no, it's not, and they're turning the tables. Like, that's the type of PvP that I think people just want. That's like the baseline. That's what PvP should always be. And unfortunately, healer versus anything else fails to meet that standard.
Absolutely agreed. I could not stress that more. I mean, you said it. You took essentially the words right out of my mouth. I mean, a tank versus tank, say a warrior versus a dark knight. Obviously the warrior is going to have a harder hitting class, but the dark knight's going to have more mitigation skills versus the warrior. The warrior is going to have raw DPS. The dark knight's going to have more mitigation, and the dark knight still is able to put out some pretty decent numbers. But the warrior can still self heal, and so can the dark knight. So I mean, it all comes down to who knows the class better at that point and who can sustain more.
Yeah, basically, who pulls off, who does their burst when the other tank's defensive cooldowns are not up. And that's
Exactly.
yeah. So that kind of brings us back to the PvP skills, where we have, like, okay, so Final Fantasy XIV in general has been pretty bad with crowd control skills in the first place. Like, they gave us sleep, and in the first few dungeons, like, an aspiring white mage or black mage will try to cast sleep on a mob that they think shouldn't be hit, but then everyone's like AoEing them, or DPS, split DPS for whatever reason, or whatever. Like, the point is, the game does not encourage crowd control in the PvE sense. Um, there's very little, if any, crowd control. Even though we have crowd control skills, we have binds, but there are many binds that get broken once damage is done. Like, what's the point? The bind lasts for like 5 or 10 seconds. The sleep lasts for like 30 seconds. And we're coming from games where, like in SWTOR, sleeps, binds, and interrupts. Like, as a DPS, I had to interrupt certain skills. Like, that was one of my jobs. And we don't have that type, like something as simple as that we don't have in Final Fantasy XIV. We can't interrupt certain skills, and certainly most DPS aren't tasked to do it. There are a couple niche situations, but that's not something that's pushed. In PvP, we kind of get that a little bit more. Some classes get an extra stun. Some classes get a stun in the first place, like or not a stun. Well, a stun and a knockback. Like for instance, Bard either gets a knockback or a stun, one of those. But basically, they're given a skill that they need for PvP or is useful in PvP that they just didn't get from their PvE skill set. Unfortunately, I think it was Bard that also got screwed in that in the 1v1 sense, they didn't really have any skills that would like make an actual difference. there was two hard hitting skills. There was like together they were like 350 potency, which is nothing to sneeze at, but that doesn't change anything. That's literally just extra burst if you can fit it in your PvE rotation or whatever your rotation is for PvP. Whereas healers get like game changing, like attunement. Attunement is so overpowered. I used it, and I kind of felt bad when I used it because it was against a Dragoon, and he had Blood of the Dragon up, and I knew his hardest hitting skills were coming up. So I just hit I buffed my fairy, and then I turned on regen, and then I hit attunement, and I just sat there for like 10 seconds, and that was my tactic. Eat all of his hits, and when it's done, go on the offensive, which is great for me, and it was a great healer tactic for my role. But like Bard doesn't have anything like that. They don't have a game-changing tactic. They don't have anything that's more than hit harder for a few seconds.
Right. I mean, some classes kind of got the crap end of the stick on it, to be completely honest. I mean, I only have experience with my ninja, and I think Paladin are going into PvP, so I mean, I can't really say too much, to be completely honest, for their skills, but I mean, some of them just, like you said, Bard got the crap end of the stick on a lot of it.
Yeah, I think now. Okay, so here is we're moving kind of. So it's almost becoming a dead horse. Like we're beating the crap out of this. Healers, time limits, blah blah blah. It sucks. Regardless of whether you agree or not, like something needs to be done. And I think that's kind of essentially we're just gonna have to leave it, and hopefully someone from Square sees this, or already one of the devs sees it, or they already know, or enough of us pipe up about it that it becomes something that we address. But I kind of want to go not exactly on a tangent, but I want to try something different. I know I already talked about PvP gear a little bit, and I already talked about how like I wore Vit gear and I wore Int gear on my Scholar to address shortcomings, whether it was surviving melee LBs. Although melee LBs got nerfed. Just really quick aside, melee LBs got nerfed to the point where healers don't have to wear Vit gear anymore, and I don't know how I feel about that because it was kind of like the difference between an experienced healer and one that's not. Like an experienced PvP oriented healer will put the time in to get fending gear, like the preparation. Like I said, it was the difference between someone who just joined and should be able to survive, and there's a decent chance they will, but against an experienced player or a class meant to take them down, like a melee DPS, they're going to lose unless they prepared for that exact situation, and they're willing to sacrifice the mind for it, right? The healing capabilities. I think losing that death kind of hurt PvP. Losing that, like it was very shallow. It was just a little bit of extra death to the healer experience in PvP, and they took it away, unfortunately. And PvP gear, I think, and now here's the crazy idea. We've been talking about being able to, or we've been talking about we should have tweaks to PvP skills, right? Like we've been harping on Bard getting screwed over, where their skills aren't really game changing. What if, and here's the crazy experimentation part, what if we solve the PvP, or try to solve the PvP problem with a solution that we've been harping on harping and hoping to get for PvP for PvE. And the solution is vertical progression versus horizontal progression. So for the uninformed, for the people who don't know what that means, um, vertical progression is what we currently have in Final Fantasy XIV. We have gear that just gets stronger and stronger every patch. We get better gear that replaces our older gear, and it's essentially a gear treadmill, and for the most part, we put up with it. Some of us enjoy it. Some of us enjoy getting stronger, seeing bigger numbers. Some of us see it as a means to the end. Like, for instance, the gear you earn through Savage, some people earn it because they want the prestige of having it. Some people get it because that's literally what they need to progress further in Savage rating. And they're valid reasons, completely valid reasons to do it, or to try to get that gear. Uh, Vertical progression is getting gear that's on roughly the same level. Like, for instance, uh, your main stat in Vit, let's say it's 100 plus 100 for your strength and Vit on your ninja. Two pieces of gear both give plus 100 to strength and Vit, but the gear gives different effects. Like, for instance, if you wore one piece of gear, you've got, I don't know, Kane, what would you like to see on a skill? Like, what kind of skill would you like to see? One of your poisons. Your poisons act differently. It changes your, instead of changing your move from a stun to a silence, it changes it to a enfeeblement. Change it to HP down or something. Something that changes the effect of your skills. So you can essentially swap your gear around and build the one you want. What if, now taking that idea, now taking horizontal progression, what if we applied that to the PvP space?
I honestly think that would be amazing. I mean, like you had said, I mean, so the ability to essentially, your example was swap a poison part out. So my Kiss of the Viper versus my Kiss of the Wasps, my Kiss of the Viper will give me a silence when I use, God dang it, I can't even think of the skill now. But whenever I use it, it gives me a small amount of MP back, or not MP, of HP back from the damage that is done, and it silences the target as well. Now, if I could use that as a damage down in, say, a PvP area or a PvE area, essentially, I mean, that would make it a, even more of a game-changing class to use. For example, the ninja already has the vulnerability up skill with Suiton and Trick Attack. I mean, that is essential for basically any progression rating, I guess you could say. I mean, there are
Well,
groups that have a monk and a dragoon, but the full utility of a ninja is to buff the entire party with that vulnerability up damage for that 10 seconds. So everyone's going to go ham at that point against one target and just utterly destroy its health pool as quick as they can.
so all right, I get where you're going, but I want to put a caveat on this. I really only want to I only really want to encourage pushing this idea on PvP because as interesting as it would be in the PvE space, it would be too drastic of a change right now. Like, we're
It would
mid-explode.
essentially break the game.
It would be, well, one. There's no way it would come out before 4.0. I mean, it'd be nice, interesting if it came out in PvE for 4.0, but um, I think that because it would be less of a drastic. I mean, it would still be a drastic change, but it would affect far less of the player base, and it would be, I think, far more in line with the types of changes they've done to PvP. I think both the fact that, like, for instance, how many people playing PvP is both a positive and a negative thing. Like, and that's always going to be, there's almost always going to be less PvPers in a PvE oriented game, unless you're playing, you're playing League of Legends. There's no way it's more PvP than PvE. Does that make sense? There's no way to really separate it. But in games like this, where it's primarily PvE oriented, there's always going to be less PvPers. Like it's going to be a fraction of the population, the whole population. But it's almost like you could. It's almost like we could treat PvP as the, I wouldn't say beta or dev testers, but essentially a way to try out new ideas without drastically affecting everyone. And because of the fact that right now to really get into PvP, you kind of have to go out of your way, and most people aren't even really satisfied with it right now, versus people starting to become more satisfied with the rating scene, where it's coming back with the creator tier and Midas. So it started coming back with Midas, and it's feeling better with the creator and more people doing it. But the PvP sphere might be just the right place to try out these crazy ideas. What do you think, Kane?
Well, absolutely. Sorry, I was sending you a message, but absolutely, I agree. I mean, the PvP world would be essentially a good spot to test, like you had said, a vertical gear progression. Changing out certain gears will give you, or certain gear pieces will give you certain skills or buff certain skills. And I really think that would be a good idea to test out to before they try to implement anything in a PvE environment. I mean, the PvP world is, like you said, just a small niche that not very many people will do, but there is still enough out there that they can give some type of feedback to the devs. You know, this works, this doesn't work, this is overpowered, this is underpowered. There's just so many options that you could go with, and the devs essentially would have a clean slate working in the PvP world before throwing it out into the PvE.
Yeah, and I think especially if the effects. So you know how like right now they're direct buffs and nerfs to PvP skills, but they also slightly tweaked your PvE skills, like Unleash on Dark Knight, I think binds or something. Um, or it gives slow or heavy or whatever, which is completely different than what the PvE version of it does. And they've been applying it directly to the skills and tweaking them out. It would be really neat if they could instead give that effect to certain gear. Then it would also give us a reason to actually go and get PvP gear. Like right now, uh, PvP gear is glamour. Like there's no reason to wear it really, unless there's a group of people who are running tournaments in Wolves Den or Frontlines, and they're forcing everyone to do, wear PvP gear. And there's the item level sync, and there's the materia sync. Like right now, there's really no reason to get PvP gear unless you want it for glamour. And while that's kind of been
Absolutely.
accepted, like it's okay, that's again, it's kind of like the healer versus healer fight. We put up with it, but we're not really happy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there is, like you said, there's no real reason for anyone to really go PvP. There's no major reward system for anyone to really do it. I mean, sure, Square Enix has implemented the feast and the ranking system for that, but I mean, that is, unless you want to devote lots and lots of time to PvP to get the best on your data center or server or however they have worked it, there's no real benefit to do it, in my opinion. It's just kind of a waste of time unless you want to get glam. Now, the ninja glam looks amazing. The tank glam looks amazing. Those are the only two that I have seen so far, and those, like, I wish I didn't have to do PvP to get those things because they just look freaking awesome. But I mean, I guess there's a kind of a separate reward system, but after you get to that point, there's no real reason to keep going into the PvP area getting gear from that area, it's just kind of dead after that. There's nothing to it.
So I'm on the opposite side of you. I hate all the healer PvP gear because it's clearly oriented towards women, female players, like the actual like the body. Like it's fine if another dude wants to wear gear, a robe with like a boob window, but I don't care for it. Like I would love to have like, well, I just have a thing for armor as a healer, but I kind of wish it would be, I wish there was less feathery, clothy robe options for healer PvP gear, because sometimes there's actually quite a few healer pieces that are primarily meant for females or um, people who play male characters, but still wanna dress more effeminate, and that's fine with me. But I just wish I had something to work for, PvP wise.
It's
I want to
not
look like a cleric,
appealing to
man. I
you.
want to look like a cleric or something like that. So bringing it back to Dungeons and Dragons. All right. Well, I just saw your message. I know we're coming up on an hour. There's definitely other things we'd love to talk about. I think we'd love to talk about the feast, for instance, and other rewards. The actual official, officially sponsored. Like by official, I mean the game the developers actually implemented it. It's not something like the tournament we did yesterday, where the winner got a high quality 250 crafted chest of their choice, or a zoom mount. The second place got zoom mount. Um, we will definitely. I think we'll have to postpone it. We'll definitely get back to this. Maybe we'll even um, I tried reaching out to the winners from last night's event, but it was like tried to reach them out to them like 2 hours ago, so that was pretty poor planning. Oh dang, you dropped the call. Hold on, bring them on. All right.
Don't forget to unmute yourself. I don't
All
know what's
right.
going on with my phone. It just keeps dropping the call randomly. I'm in full Wi-Fi signal. I don't get it. I'll figure it out later. But the
Well, we're
gear
almost
that
done.
we were talking about, your gear not appealing to you. I mean, I don't know. They can't. It's really hard to make a unisex type glamour for everyone, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, I
Because
get that.
I know the tank gear makes you look bulky as hell, especially if you're a female character. You don't want to look like She-Hulk and run around and chase things as She-Hulk. They need to, I don't know. I guess I wish they would have separate options for male and female characters in that aspect for gear sets for
Yeah,
PvP stuff.
they should get rid of the class restriction. That's just. I would love to wear some tank armor. So you probably have, if I was a female, I probably have the same problem with tank sets where it's primarily geared or primarily catered to male players. Like it's very bulky, it's very masculine. What if I wanted a more effeminate tanking set, something that was, not massive, not skimpy like some games, not going to the opposite extreme, but something that's also not like having 3 heads as my headpiece and like giant pauldrons, something like that. So yeah, there's got some kind of change that needs to happen to get people happy, and I think they're kind of getting there. I mean, they announced the male version of the bunny outfit, so they're starting to make those changes. But yeah,
I'm not
so
looking forward to that. I can just imagine giant male Rogans running around with the bunny outfit in pumps and everything, and it's
yeah.
going to be funny, but I'm just not looking forward to that scene.
All right. Well, I was also kind of wrapping things up where I was saying there's a bunch of other topics we'd love to cover, like the official feast and the actual rewards that came from the developers and not just from us. Like we gave out the high quality 250 crafted gear and a zoom out, like actual rewards. Like they actually gave out other gear, PvP specific gear to the top PvPer in each data center. But we're gonna have to postpone that, put on another show, maybe bring on the people that won yesterday's tournament, because I said how I poorly planned it. Like I messaged them 2 hours before our show started, and clearly they couldn't make it onto the show. But maybe we could interview them sometime or interview other people about their PvP experience, especially if they did the feast. Like that would be interesting to talk to someone who did that.
Oh, absolutely.
I know we have
Now,
a couple on our server.
oh yeah. Who were the winners for yesterday's tournament, by the way? I remember Sertray was our warrior that won.
Sertray won first place. Ricard won second place, and Yui Lei won third place. I was only able to get in contact with Trey and Yui. So if Ricard, if you're on, if you're listening, or if someone knows you, if you know Ricard, let him know we're looking for him. It'd be great to interview them at some point or talk to them if they're willing.
You can't hide because I'll find you, Ricard. I will find you.
All right. Well, with that said, we'll definitely come back to PvP at some point. It's right about time though for us to give the people. There's a couple people watching us online, obviously, and actually in game right now. We'd like to thank you for being here. We're actually gonna do a shout out to you right now. I'm going to switch off iCam, but we're also going to give you one of you lucky attendees, one of you lucky audience members, a chance to win either a, what are they, Kane? A Bluebird and a Gestahl?
Yep, a Bluebird and a Gestahl minion.
Alright, so we're going to try to wrap up. There's something new. We're going to add a little mini game to our show to reward the people who stuck it out all the way to the end. Like you get the shout out at the beginning, but then you get an actual reward at the end for being here and supporting us. And it'll happen at every show, but I'd like to lead us out to the basement of our FC mansion right now, and we'll go to the minigame area. Alright, so...
Alright, so what the rules are for the game now is essentially the people that are here that are participating, all they're going to be doing is doing a /random, and the person with the highest number will be selecting one of these 3 doors downstairs. Now, you will be hiding, you'll be back here by the bookshelves all the way in the back where we normally host our show. And you will be standing back there, so that way you cannot see where the portrait is placed. And the other people, the other contestants that are here as well, will be standing back here. Actually, you know what? We'll have everyone stand back here behind these bookshelves, so that way no one can try to guess or anything like that, besides the person that is going to be trying to win the minions, essentially. So you'll be going back there doing /random, and your Binks cat is coming out right now. We will be doing a /random. They pick the door, and you essentially have to find the door with the portrait behind it. And that gets you your choice of the Bluebird minion or the Gestahl minion. Now, where are these 3 stooges at? Did they leave?
Come on down. Are they in the studio?
I'm going to go check really quick.
Yeah, for those of you watching the stream,
they're still in there.
You literally just walk up to one of these doors, and the portrait will be behind it. So like Kane said, to prevent cheating, you can't just run up and choose all the doors. You have to choose which door you're going to get beforehand. And you can't really get behind it. I'll be putting the portrait up, and I'll be killing the stream. Not killing the stream. I'll be blanking the stream so you can't see where I put it. But so let's get those 3 stooges out here and find our lucky contestants.
I think they keep getting locked in your room, PJ.
Locked? What?
They haven't made it outside your room yet. So you're going to be going downstairs. I'm going to message them.
I mean, you still have a 1 in 3 chance, even if you got that.
Well, she's a slightly bit intoxicated, so.
Still a 1 in 3 chance.
Where are you going, crazy? Down here. All right, so we're gonna have you guys stand back here in our normal hosting area.
Eh,
Eh,
back here is fine. Back
yeah,
here's
this
fine.
works too.
Alright, so between the three of you, there's the first random, Kira, with the 190. Let's get the other two randoms rolled.
Backslash random. Ooh, Hika with an
Hika,
810.
810.
Xander, please roll a 900. Oh, red.
Okay.
All
Hika,
right.
please step right up. You are a lucky audience member today. Please stand where I'm at right here.
We forget that there is a delay between
Oh yeah, there's a...
the stream and what they're seeing. So,
Alright, so I'm gonna blank the stream. Okay, and now I'm going to put...
no, she's feisty tonight. Oh God, please tell me you have to remove more stuff.
No, I took care of that already.
Oh no, you're fine, Xander. No worries. I forget there's like a 30-second delay.
Alright. Stream is coming back up. Alright.
All right, so now she's going to pick a door, and the kitties are playing. So I'm gonna look at that for a second. Oh. Oh, is this it?
That
Let's
one in the
see.
front.
RP walk.
Alright. Walk up.
Oh, whammy.
And she's a winner. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. She got the, there's nothing behind these doors. Alright, so that's pretty literally drunk. Yeah, that's how easy it is to win either a Gestahl or a Bluebird. And while you give that prize out to her, I have consolation prizes.
Yes, give them those chubs. All right, well, I actually like this idea of having the mini game and random prizes to give away to people. It makes it much more fun and enjoyable for people to actually come and participate and talk with us.
Yeah, that was good. I mean, it was super simple. We'll probably think of other mini games to do, but that was a super simple idea.
Mm-hmm.
I literally put this up in like 5 minutes, so it's poorly positioned, but it'll look better, and we'll have to keep this going because yeah, I don't know what we should give next week, but we'll think of something.
Oh yeah, we'll figure something out. We will figure something out. But we're just going to keep making sure that, we get the community involved with our show. I'm sorry if you can hear my dogs. They're trying to fight in my room.
Yeah, that's alright. That's alright. Yeah, it was a little odd tonight because usually the community events to go on actually happen, I think at least an hour or two before an hour or two. Give my husband a chub. I don't know how I feel. Usually the community events happen about an hour or two before ours. Today the timing was a little weird, so unfortunately it was either one or the other. But thank you guys for coming to ours, and normally, usually we'd say go to the other ones, we promote them as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of
Well,
cross promotion
absolutely.
going on. But we're going to be, speaking of them, the community admins, we had postponed that interview, but we're going to make them do it next week.
Yep. That is something I've been looking forward to. That is actually one of the first items that we had talked about when we were brainstorming this show. So I'm really excited to get them on here to discuss things with them and talk to them.
Yeah. All right. Well, please look forward to that. Please look forward to it next week. Our interview with the admins of the community Famfrit community page, the group, the ones that have been hosting and promoting all of our events. Really good at keeping in touch with the more social aspect of our server. And that about wraps it up for tonight's show. I hope you enjoyed this PvP oriented talk. And if you have any ideas, anything you'd like to add to discussion, please don't hesitate to send that in. I may have lost Kane again. Let me bring him up. No, you're
Nope, I'm
back.
still here. I just
Okay.
muted myself. But yeah, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, things that you think we should do with the show, anything to improve the show, or just to get more people involved with it, send me or Bellator Lucius mail or find us on Facebook. And we will do what we can to implement things and figure out the best way to go about everything. But thank you guys for watching and listening, and also for those that were here to participate. I appreciate you guys being here. And that is it for Get Good tonight. We will be back next week with the community admins.
Yep. All right. Thank you for tuning in. We're signing off. Remember, guys, get good.